welcome everybody. My name is Jillian Taylor, and of course we have Rod Cherkas here to focus on his book, Reach. But before we jump in, we'll start off with some housekeeping and we'll introduce ourselves as well. So we do encourage you to turn on your camera. And Rod, do you mind while I'm talking to let people in? Okay, cool. This is great. We have people joining. This is awesome. Great to see. So yes, as I said, thank you for joining us. We encourage you to turn on your camera, and in the chat, feel free to let us know where you're located or where you're joining us from, and also what role you're in, if you're in CS especially, and also feel free to mention if you're currently open to work as well. It's a good place to network. And you can drop your LinkedIn profile as well if you feel like it. And of course, as we go, please ask any questions in the chat, and we'll get to them as we go through. Rod's got a few sort of questions and ways to engage with everybody who's interested in participating. So please also add to the chat too. And one last thing, please remember to keep yourself muted unless you have something to say, of course. We do encourage that, but just remember to keep yourself muted the rest of the time. And so to jump into it, my name is Jillian, as I mentioned. I'm located in Vancouver, BC, Canada. And I've been in customer success for 15 years. That includes account management, operations, leadership. So I'm very passionate about customer success as a whole. And yeah, without further ado, I will pass it over to you, Rod, and we'll let you introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the book.
Excellent. Thank you, Jillian. And I wanted to also just thank the Practical CSM organization for sponsoring this and having these book club discussions and hosting it. And I really appreciate everybody taking some time today to join us and talk about a very important trend that's happening in our customer success community that I feel has the potential to help us all develop new skills, contribute even more to the results at the companies that we work for, and also help us progress significantly in our careers. So we're going to talk today about some of the concepts that I've outlined and developed in a book that came out in April called Reach. But more importantly, I also want to give everybody a chance for us to have a discussion. So I'd really encourage folks to speak up. I'll ask some questions of the group. I hope you'll take yourself off mute. I may do a little bit of cold calling for some names of people that I recognize on the call here as we go through, so that we can all learn a bit. We can feel a little bit more confident about our roles and what's happening in our companies as we go into 2025. So I'd like to start with a short story. So in last April, I have a daughter who is a senior in high school and had recently been accepted into a number of colleges that we started to go visit. How many of you felt like the college decision process was kind of stressful, right? It's a sort of a challenging time, big decision. You have to make a decision about where you're going to go, sort of develop the skills that you think you're going to need for the future. And so she was accepted into the University of Wisconsin. We live in San Mateo, California, so pretty moderate climate. And she was accepted across country at University of Wisconsin. And on paper, it felt like a really good place for her. So we go out and visit, and this is the beginning of April. So it's like what should be spring. We get there, it's snowy, it's freezing cold. There's like water on the streets. We're all in our tennis shoes and we're just like freezing cold. But as Marley walks around campus, she meets the professors and the teachers there. She meets a lot of the other kids and starts to get over the fact that, hey, while it's far away, this could be a really great place for her to go. And she starts to feel very confident about that. And so for the first time going to visit schools, we actually bought a school sweatshirt. Normally we just got like a keychain because you can't get all this big stuff. You have like a closet full of things you don't need. But anyway, she felt like this is the place that she was going to go to. And so she bought a sweatshirt. And even though she felt so confident that this was the place she wanted to go, when she got home, she still was reluctant to rip the tag off. Like that was just an emotional thing for her of like ripping the tag off and making a commitment that this was a place that she was going to go to help her develop the skills that she wanted for the future. So the reason that I'm telling you this is because I think there are some trends that are happening in our customer success world and in our jobs that are important, and I would encourage you to rip the tag off. In particular, there's an expectation that customer success teams contribute to top line revenue growth, that they become potentially a little bit more commercial, that you are listening for clues for expansion opportunities, and you're working with your customers to help them get more value from your solutions. This is an evolving expectation of investors and boards and your CEOs and your executive teams about what the role of customer success is. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about how you can develop some of these skills that are really, that I believe are critical for your success in the future. So I hope you'll help, by the end of our discussion today, feel a bit more comfortable that these are skills that you can develop to help you develop, to help you be the leader that you want to be in the future. I've been talking to hundreds of CS leaders and customer success managers over the past couple of months as I've been touring around the country, working with organizations. I do consulting, so working with clients. And so many of them are looking for ways to impact that top line revenue growth. And they're looking for organizations that are innovative. I've had a client that after we rolled out Reach in their organization, in the first full quarter after they'd done that, they saw a 23% increase in their expansion bookings after having been flat for 5 quarters in a row, right? It's just a new set of skills, and there's so much opportunity out there for our clients to get more value from our solutions and an expectation. So I'd like to talk today about some of the skills that you can be developing, how you can leverage Reach in your organization, and if you're interested, how I can help support you in this path. So I want to help your organizations. This has been what I've been talking about and writing about in the past. Just in case you don't know my background, I've been a post-sale executive my whole life until just a couple of years ago. I ran post-sale operations for Intuit's payroll services. I worked at Ring Central running all their post-sale organizations. I was at Marketo for 5 years running their professional services and education. And then most recently, I was at Gainsight up until they were acquired by Vista Equity Partners. And then I started a consulting business working with companies to help them improve retention rates, help them drive expansion, help them improve time to value with new service offerings or improving their onboarding process. And over the course of that time, I've done a lot of writing and listening and have written 2 books, Chief Customer Officer Playbook, and now this one, Reach. And so my goal over in 2025 is to really help organizations empower themselves so that you can transform your organizations into contributors to top line revenue. We are not talking about post-sale teams becoming salespeople. That's not our role. But we are having these regular interactions with customers, and I think it's critical that we increasingly be listening for ways that we can provide more value to the organizations. And so, I've been doing lots of speaking and conferences. This was at the Gainsight conference last May, and I hope you'll sort of join me and join so many of us that are thinking about how can we contribute to this top
Good
line.
time to show the book.
There you go. So we,
And actually, quick question for you, Rod, then let me know if it's a good time, but how you, because you just mentioned, and a lot of people probably know you wrote a book before you wrote Reach. And so what was it that instigated the idea and the project for doing a second book and a different topic?
yeah. Well, as the changes were happening in a lot of the software and technology companies, as companies were looking to grow top line revenue growth, as it was becoming increasingly harder to bring in new customers, and companies were also looking at ways to improve profitability. It was just putting strains on resources, not just in customer success teams, but in lots of organizations. And it became more imperative that customer success organizations were able to measure the value that they were providing to their companies, not just in ways that were improving retention rates, which has been sort of our historical role, but also in ways that were contributing to top line revenue growth because it needed to fill a gap that was happening at a lot of companies. And when I would talk to people, they would say, hey, like, we don't have our own sales methodology. Sales organizations have Medic, or they have the Challenger sale, or they have Sandler, they have Spins. There's like Spice. There's like a laundry list of sales methodologies, and every organization has at least one that they apply. When they said, "Hey, we're being asked to drive expansion revenue, but where's our methodology? How do we make that repeatable?" And that was a theme that I'd seen in the clients that I was working with as well. And so I started to assemble the resources that I've been using with my own clients and put that together into this reach framework where we'll talk about. And I have surprisingly enjoyed writing and speaking. So just to be clear, like before I did consulting, I never did public speaking. I never wrote. I never posted on LinkedIn. So this is a really good example for all of you that you can develop new skills that are adjacent to things that you're already doing, and by practicing them, you can get good at it. So I'd encourage you to think about it. So today we're going to talk about some trends. We're going to talk about reach, and I'll give you some tips and strategies that you can be thinking about for 2025. Okay? So I'd like to stop here and have a little bit of a discussion about, what's changing in your environment at your companies about the expectations of your team's contribution to top line revenue growth. Somebody interested in, can someone come off mute? Or maybe I'll call some folks. Danielle?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. I think that we, like most CS organizations last year, really started to take a good look and have the expectations that the vast majority of the revenue is not going to be coming from new business, but that from existing business. And therefore, the challenge, some of the challenges there are with the mindset of some of the team members, right? You have client success managers that have sales experience and client success managers that don't have that sales experience that, need that mindset shift. And then also the challenges that, we face are regarding the continuous battle of making sure that you are spending your time in the right place as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this concept prioritization of time and a little bit of fear of taking on some new responsibilities and new skills. And I'd encourage you, like, think about ripping off that tag, be okay. Having some of these skills doesn't mean you're becoming a salesperson, but you're listening for ways to expand value. Anyone else like to share?
Yeah, I put it in the chat, so we've got in there as well. So Virginia, seeing that our product and services are built for initial sale, but not scaled expansion.
Yeah. Virginia, could you explain more?
Sure. So we have a little bit of a service problem where sort of bennies get thrown in at the last minute to sweeten the deal and get it across the line. But that means that our contracts, once they get to CS, are inconsistent in such a way that it's hard to build an expansion journey that includes, an entire tier or entire group of customers. It really ends up being a very one-off process to look at each individual customer, which is time consuming and obviously not helping our overhead costs as we attempt to put more, I'll say, energy into revenue from expansion rather than from initial sale.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And as we talk today about reach, think about how it can become a repeatable process. So, like you said, you don't have all of these one-off opportunities, but you can be looking at your customer base systematically and identifying, which customers or which groups of customers have expansion potential, not necessarily like an immediate sales opportunity, but could grow in the future. And there may be others where there's just not an opportunity, and you put those in a different group, and you prioritize where you spend your time. But yeah, thank you for your feedback. Anybody else want to share how their expectations have been changing in their group about their role in expansion?
Well, Mohammed or Andra might. Mohammed's
Oh, do you want to share?
contribution. Yeah, aligning sales account plan with CS growth plan is a challenge sometimes.
Yeah. Can you share more about what that means?
Yeah, hello, good evening, everyone. Yeah, sometimes sales, they have a plan just to expand their footprint within the account that most of the time does not really help the customer success growth plan, where you have, agreed on a plan with the customer to go into a direction, and sales come up with a different direction that, because of their target, because of their quota, they need to go that direction, which sometimes is very challenging to put sales on the ground, I would say, and try to convince them that, the way we are going with the customer to grow is this way, because we have seen so and so, and that will help us to grow within the account without adding an additional seat or without adding an additional model. All we need to do is just to grow the plan in this direction, because that's where they are hitting with their product, with their projects, and this is how we can grow within the account without adding a new product to the sales.
Right. Well, thank you. And then maybe one more. Livy, you mentioned that you've restructured your CS team to be much more focused on identifying opportunities as you're working with clients. Can you share a little bit more about that and how that's going?
Yes, so our CS team, we kind of organically have added to expansion revenue, but we certainly haven't gone out of our way, if you like, for the team to have those meaningful conversations when they're speaking to the clients. So we have a new head of department who's really helped to drive this forward. So it's kind of really communicating to the team that actually, we don't expect to be salespeople, but it's enabling them to understand in those conversations they're having when they can mention, identify upsell opportunities, but also really have meaningful conversations, and training them in that aspect, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I think what you've just described, Livy, is what we're going to be talking about today, is that you're not becoming a salesperson. You're just in the conversations that you're already having with your customers. You're just being a little bit more deliberate about the questions that you're asking, your curiosity for better understanding, and thinking about how you can provide more value to them. If it turns into a sale, great, right? But it's not about the selling. It's about how can you provide more value to them, because you know your products really well. You get to know the needs of customers. And so I think that approach that you're taking is really important. And, part of what I do for my work is I run run workshops for organizations to help provide that training in how to listen better, how to have better sort of discovery questions, but that are natural. It's not sort of an inquisition. It's not a set of prescribed questions. It's just doing your job and observing about how you can provide more value. So thanks for sharing that.
Welcome.
So we're going to talk today, help a little bit about basic understanding of reach, help you think about what your team strategy is around expansion in 2025, and I'd encourage you to be a little bit more aggressive about taking on responsibility. That doesn't necessarily mean taking on quota, but potentially contributing to expansion or having better relationships with your AEs or account managers if there's another group that's doing it, and think about what your action plan is. Like, I'd encourage you, like, take some notes today and think about, are there 2 or 3 different things that you can be doing as you're putting together or your teams are contributing to your fiscal year strategy for 2025? And hopefully you'll build some confidence that you can have this. And again, I'd be happy to work with you and your teams to help provide this training in these short workshops, either virtually or in person, or work with you during your breakouts at your sales kickoff. So let me know if there's ways I can help you. Right. So we talked a little bit about the challenges that are happening in our organizations and in our customer success roles. Some of them are related to the work that we do in our day-to-day. We have to contribute more to expansion revenue. We have to help our teams and ourselves develop the skills we need to be the leaders in our organizations that our companies need. There's a lot of focus around productivity improvements, potentially with AI. And someone earlier mentioned the importance of being able to prioritize where you spend your time. So I think those are really important. And, your leaders are looking for ways to keep growing your companies, even in these difficult times. And so a lot of us rely on how can we do this in a repeatable way, right? Because someone mentioned earlier, you don't want it to be one-offs. I wish it were different, but sales organizations get a lot of resources from like sales, marketing, enablement to help build out this repeatable process for new logo sales. There was some research done by Insight Partners that came out about a year ago that kind of reinforced a lot of the themes that I've been seeing, which is there's nothing in place for our customer success teams. And I seriously do not know why. But in any case, they asked questions of about 200. They got responses from about 200 leaders at their portfolio companies that showed that about 86% of them had documented processes for onboarding, 68% for renewals, but shockingly low percentage of organizations had documented processes for how to do expansions, which for me was sort of a really big gap because our companies are expecting us to play this role, but we're not either documenting it or putting in place these training resources. And similarly, there's all these organizations that are doing training for sales teams, but there's really been nothing for customer success organizations. And it's not adequate that the CS teams just get put into the same sales training. When I've talked to folks like yourself, it just doesn't resonate. And so from that, I also was listening to what people are feeling, right? Like they don't want to end up in these sales trainings. This is a lot of what I hear from customer success folks. And so, Danielle, you talked a couple minutes ago about changing mindset and helping people see that there are new skills that will be expected of them in the future. I would love to see more job descriptions have commercial responsibility. It doesn't say this is a sales role, but it does have expectation about contributing to this expansion revenue. Do any of these resonate with folks? When you think about it for yourselves or folks on your team, which ones of these may feel like an obstacle to contributing more to expansion?
I also just popped a question in the chat too, asking if people are responsible for retention and or expansion or neither themselves too.
Yeah.
And feel free to just speak out. You don't have to write in the chat either.
Yeah. Veronica, you'd mentioned that. Sorry, someone want to say something?
Hi, everyone. Emily, I actually work with Danielle on the CS leadership team, and yeah, we're responsible for both retention and growth and upsells. And I think the one in the middle there is kind of what I hear from my direct reports sometimes that fear of being, too salesy and hurting the relationship there.
Yeah. Why do you think that's a fear?
I think there's I think we've got a big part to play in retention, and I think sometimes that might kind of overcloud or kind of come in too strong. And in terms of like what you mentioned there, if you're having value-based conversations, it shouldn't feel salesy because, we, trust our product services, and we should kind of stand behind that. So I think, yeah, that's.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good observation is like there's this difference between salesy and providing value to the customers. Because I've seen situations with my clients where their customers actually get really frustrated with their CSM because the customer might have to go to a competitor to solve a need that your product offers, right? You may have another adjacent service or product that works, and they didn't know about it, right? Because they're not going and doing lots of research on the internet about these things. They're in their daily interactions with you, and you're listening for these opportunities. And the same thing if there's another business unit or another region that ends up buying another service, a competitive service to something that you're offering and you're providing really good value, why wouldn't you think that one of their peers would get that same value from it? So it creates this like internal set of different experiences. But I think that this is more of a mindset than a reality. And I think if we as leaders can help frame it as there's nothing wrong with like listening for ways to provide more value, and then offering our team some training on how to have a discussion in that way so they can practice and have it feel like this is not doing a sales pitch, right? I hear a lot about it feels like I'm going to be doing like a sales pitch. And like it's a very useful solution, right? I used to work at Intuit, which made QuickBooks. And if somebody was managing QuickBooks, managing their business using QuickBooks, and we saw that they had employees, why wouldn't we want to let them know that we have a payroll service so that they don't have to do it manually? Like that's providing additional value, and it doesn't require another salesperson to come in and observe that. That's part of what we can do since we have all of this interactions. So I'd encourage you to be thinking about how with your teams you can help overcome some of these objections. So when you think about your roles next year, I just want to have you think about this. Like, what would you like your role to be and the impact next year as you're going through this fiscal planning process, whether you're involved in it directly, whether your managers are, they're kind of deciding, which are the teams, how you're going to contribute to top line revenue, profitability, defining roles and responsibilities. So there's something about your organizations. And then there's also some skills that you can be thinking about developing. What skills do you want to work on this year, whether they're formally part of your compensation plan, or it could just be part of things that are important. And I do believe that becoming, having more commercial impact, whether if you're a leader, you own expansion bookings targets, or whether you just contribute to some other part of the organization, thinking about what you need to get there.
Yes, baby.
Yeah. How many of you think that like getting training for your teams, would somebody maybe put themselves on mute? How many of you think that developing additional skills, getting some formal training would be helpful for you in the next year and developing toward this type of impact? Is that something that you see? We kind of like
Actually, I saw that Morgan commented that is a common objection about not having the skills and training.
Yeah. So I was at a sales enablement conference last week and can actually observe what's happening. Like there were 180 different applications to speak there. Mine, and I led a workshop with another woman, Alyssa Carroll, but we were the only ones that were talking about customer success and expansion. So I do feel like it's real that in your enablement teams, if you have one, are focused almost exclusively on the sellers and the new sales cycle. But I would still encourage you, part of our message was like the enablers, they're changing their name to revenue enablement. like as a function, because they're now responsible for not just the new sales, but working with post-sale teams and expansion. So they recognize the need to do it. We'll talk today about this Reach framework, and it's kind of an out-of-the-box training methodology, but that you can be using. All right, so let's talk a little bit about why that's important. So I wrote this book. The work inside, it's not super complicated to understand, but it is important to be able to practice, to be able to predictably uncover and capitalize on these expansion opportunities with data-driven insights, so that you and your teams, we talked a little bit about like prioritizing where you spend your time, using the experiences and interactions you have with your clients to help nurture and grow them, right? It's not about selling. It's about helping to uncover ways that you can add more value to your organizations. And I often use this as an example, because you're trying to take a look at your customers and understand which of them have characteristics that make them likely to grow. That's one of the first steps here in applying Reach, is focusing on the right group of customers, because not all of your customers are going to grow, and so you don't want to overinvest the time. So you look at the one on the left, you look at the one on the right, and you'd say, okay, well, which ones of these would likely maybe be a place that you could have a farm that would grow crops? And when I talk to folks, they're like, well, one on the left, it looks green. There's some water. It's flat. You can already tell that things are growing there. When you look at the right, it's rocky. It's going to be hard to get materials in and out. Looks like it's pretty dry there. So this is the same type of thing that you can look at when you're looking at your existing customers to see, are there opportunities to grow? So I want to talk a little bit about, what REACH is and what it stands for. So REACH is an acronym for 5 factors that help identify the likelihood of an account to grow with you, and that you can be working on in an account expansion plan to help uncover these opportunities. So if nothing else from this, I'd love for you to just take away these 5 items, like 5 things to think about when somebody asks you, hey, what are the growth opportunities in this account? You should be able to rattle off your answer according to the REACH, right? So R is for relationships. So this relates to the strength of your connections with your advocates and with your allies and your, sort of the key project people that you're working on. Because if you have strong relationships with your existing customers, they're much more likely to want to keep working with you. They're likely to recommend it to peers in their organization. And if you don't have strong relationships, it'll make that much harder. Second is engagement. So how much are they currently benefiting from your existing solutions? Are they using your products? Are they using all of the features and benefits? Are they getting value from it? Because if they're not using your existing solutions, they're not going to be very likely to buy additional solutions for you. Third is actions. This is things that you're looking for in the account that give you an indication that their propensity to make a decision is higher. So for example, is there a renewal coming up? If you have a professional services offering, is there some type of engagement? Maybe you have a technical account manager that's working with them. Sort of on the negative side, do they have a lot of support cases that are open and are struggling? Do they have big systems implementations going on elsewhere that would maybe create a backup in your IT organization? So you're going to be listening for certain actions that may be indicative of a company that's okay to grow with you. Third is customer value. So are they able to measure and see the value of your current solution? The more they see value from your current solution, more likely they'll be open to buying additional solutions from you. And H is horizons. And this is not necessarily under your influence, but it's an important indicator of whether a company can grow. So are there other business units? Do they operate in other regions? Is your solution strategically important to their business? How are they doing financially? This is a really good one that you can almost use sort of ChatGPT to say, hey, how is this company doing, right? Is there growth potential? If you're selling into one business unit at like NBC, They also have like Comcast, and they also have, Universal Studios, lots of other business units. So that would sort of have a high indication of, a growth potential. Any questions? This makes sense? All right. And so what you end up doing to apply reach, and that I work on with my clients in our training workshops, is how can you take a look, for those of you that may have sort of a fixed number of accounts in your portfolio, whether it's 10 or whether it's 50 or 100, how do you prioritize those accounts by growth propensity? So putting them in buckets so you can focus on the accounts that are most likely to grow with you. Developing an expansion plan. So someone earlier talked about sort of like, what's that sales plan, or what's an account expansion plan maybe that an account management team is using? Well, you can do the same thing for your accounts. Developing skills to listen for and uncover clues to how you can provide more value. And then lastly is, how do you then share your results with your organization so that they see the impact that you're having? Being able to tell good stories is really important. So I'm going to go through this quickly. This is some of the work that I do in our workshops. We actually have sort of little modules to practice this with our clients, and they end up coming out with like groups of customers that are prioritized. We have account expansion plans for particular accounts for each of the attendees, and we practice going through this workshops on listening and sort of role playing to better understand what these expansions are. But I'll go through this process quickly. So one of them is trying to prioritize the accounts into these different groups, as I mentioned, and using a scoring methodology that currently is a little bit manual. Like the CSMs have to think about where the customers are, but I'm working with companies like Gong and Fathom and Update AI to see if there are ways that we can automate it and have reach as one of the frameworks that are built in to their solutions, so that like the transcripts that come out are summarized by each of these categories. So that's, kind of an interesting thing for me to do. But in any case, the idea would be, let's say on a scale of 1 to 5, where does the customer rate on each of these 5 factors? And let's say in this particular case, I have a customer where you don't necessarily have a super strong relationship and the customer is not seeing value. They're using it a lot, but they're not able to play the value back to you. So you would develop an account expansion plan, because there may not be an immediate sales opportunity, but how do you expansion opportunity, but how do you make it more likely that they'll grow with you? So you would identify that you need to work with them over the next couple of months to build out, let's say, that new internal champion who can be an advocate for you. Maybe that involves engaging an executive from your company. Maybe you need to find ways to identify the value for the customer so that they can communicate that value internally. They could communicate it to peers and other business groups, if they were asked. And so there's in the work that I do in our workshops, there are playbooks and a set of actions that each of the participants kind of goes through to develop a plan for particular accounts that they have so that they can help them grow. And so you can then track this in your systems with notes and scoring so that you can identify customers that have higher growth propensity and lower growth propensity. One of the customers that I was working with recently that has about like 300 moderately large accounts had gone through this process with their team after our workshop. They scored each of their accounts, and then they've been working on like the high priority expansion accounts to build out those into these expansion growth opportunities. And what that allows you to do then is to build this account expansion plan. And this is an example of one of the worksheets that we might work on in my workshops that basically enables the CSM to have a bit of a structure. I mean, there's ways you can modify it for your organization, but it's thinking about, okay, well, what are the gaps and what are the action plans in each of these 5 areas to help make it more likely that your teams will grow with you. And then we have a training module. We're not going to go through that today, but we have a training module where we talk about like, well, what are the different types of sort of discovery skills? What are questions you can ask and be listening for in your daily interactions with your customers to help uncover these expansion opportunities, right? So it's like a bit of a discovery process, but it will feel natural in your daily work. It's not like, hey, we are having a sales call and I'm going to try and uncover these sales opportunities. You're already having these discussions. You can just be deliberate about the questions that you're asking. Okay? Let me stop here for a minute. Does this concept of prioritizing your accounts, identifying an expansion plan, starting to listen for these growth opportunities make sense? Yeah.
I think probably lots of people would like this because it's something you can actually use and fill in, and you can use it as your account plan.
Yeah. Yeah. When I've done this, people feel like it is helpful to have a structure. And we also modify when I do the workshops with my clients, we modify the questions that we're thinking about according to like their business, putting, sort of changing the words to make sure that they match. Do you call it customers? Do you call it clients? Do you call it, certain type of business types? Are there particular questions that are relevant for your business area? But the concept is that you're providing some of this training and consistency to your teams. So you as a leader would expect to see more repeatable results. So if you're interested, and this is an example, if you can scan this to get this one-page cheat sheet that I have, but it basically is a set of questions that you can be asking your teams for each of these 5 reach factors. So if I was going to suggest to you, like, print out one thing, you can download this from my website. You can just take a picture on your phone and get that. So this is kind of my favorite resource to share with folks. So hopefully you'll just take a minute to grab that. Right. But the idea here is that for each of these factors, there are a set of questions that you and your team can be thinking about. So these aren't necessarily the discovery questions that you're asking your customers, but this is how you would identify like how strong your relationship is, how strong your engagement is. Are there actions that are coming up that make it more likely that they would grow with you? How would they interpret customer value, and how to think about the company's, growth opportunities according to the Horizon concept. Right? It's kind of fun to do. Right? So let me just give an example real quickly about the relationship. So for example, you'd be thinking about, how strong your relationship is. Do you actually know who your key advocates and allies and decision makers are? What is the strength of your relationship? Like, are you having strategic discussions with them? Would they be champions for your business and the value you provide internally? Who do you need to develop relationships with? Are there certain people that you're missing? Because it could be an executive sponsor, right? We have turnover at our customers all the time, and we should just expect that. We shouldn't be surprised. I mean, certainly disappointed, but we shouldn't be surprised. So what's our plan to help get new people reintroduced to your solution or to the value you're providing? And in some cases, there may be leaders internally that you can get involved to help build those relationships. So when you're thinking about what are the strong characteristics of them, are you having, regular good interactions with them? Is it going beyond sort of tactical? They have an issue, you help respond to it, but are you able to provide value to their organization and also to them in their careers? I think this is something that's often missed and underappreciated is, are you able to help them grow in their career, make them look good internally, help them get promoted? So if you can do that, your solution will be that much more important, and you personally will be that much more important. And so that enables them to, how do you give them resources so that they can showcase the results that you're getting from working with you in your business? Not necessarily like saying how great your solution is, but you want to share the results that they're getting so that other people say, hey, how did you do that? If you're selling to a marketer in one business unit, there's a marketer in another that maybe they have a best practices quarterly meeting, or they're part of a centralized organization. They want to go, hey, how did you do that? How are you getting to speak at these events? How are you getting invited to participate in webinars? And are they sharing their results with their other teams? So we basically have this set of playbooks and activities that you as a CSM could be doing for each of these 5 factors that I build into the workshops that I do. So here's an example, like these actions you can take, and underneath each of these and the work that we do are examples of like, here are things you can do, discrete examples to help your customers become more vocal advocates, how you can help nurture multiple champions, how you can think about creating career value for your customers, or engaging your executives in ways that help customers understand how you can provide more value to them. Right. So anyway, we go through this for each of these 5 factors. And what this enables the teams I work with to do is have a pretty out-of-the-box process for contributing to expansion. Now, while we do this in a half-day workshop, it can be done either remotely or in person. If you're interested, a lot of companies are having sort of sales kickoffs in January, February. You don't necessarily want to end up having your CS team just sit in the sales kickoff for 2 or 3 days and doing all these sales meetings. A lot of people I talk to are having these breakouts for their CS team. So if you're interested, I can participate in your sales kickoff or revenue kickoff meetings as sort of a breakout session. But I can also do those outside of that. Some people have to get their teams together on a quarterly basis, and I also do these virtually on Zoom, and that can go pretty well. So anyway, there's this expansion workup. We have lots of resources around prioritization, how you think about developing your expansion plan. We practice the role playing and listening for these clues so that people get practice and help overcome some of those objections we talked about earlier. And if you have a training organization, we can also develop a facilitator's guide that makes it easy for your groups to roll it out to other business groups. Like if your CS team is bigger, then you can pull together in one workshop. The training can be conducted by your internal training team with some of these resources so that you can make sure you're getting your teams trained, monitoring and tracking in your systems, right? How many of you are doing some type of well, first, how many of you are participating in some type of sales kickoff? And then are you participating in or potentially leading a CS breakout, right? And then maybe you can put in the chat, if you're having this CS breakout, like, are you thinking about doing expansion? Like, is this an important theme that you are thinking of building out and training your team on and kind of using that time together? I'm really curious to see how important this is in the different organizations. So maybe you can share. Yeah. Yeah. Morgan, are you or maybe Shayla, are you leading the breakout at the sales kickoff? Is there are you thinking about what your agendas can be, and how do you decide what your agendas are going to be?
So I am leading a session, but unfortunately not one in this particular area, but my colleagues are. I'm kind of representing our team right now on this webinar to gather information because we are looking currently at the REACH framework to determine if it kind of aligns with where we are seeing gaps in growth opportunities. But we do have several sessions that are focused around cross-sell, upsell, but also some of the specific areas within REACH, like how do you grow relationships that lead to growth opportunities. We're also really interested in how you define and look at action. A lot of times we find that we look at that in our industry as actions we are taking to support the partner versus what are actions that the customers are specifically doing that we should be observing and paying attention to that indicate growth. So those are some of the things we're kind of looking at for our sales kickoff, but I'm not positive. We do ours in early December, and I'm not quite sure that we'll be ready by then for a full launch, but we do hope by the first of the year.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'd encourage you, for those of you who are listening, like advocate for the training and the sessions that you need. I think expansion is important, but whatever it is, take the opportunities when you're getting the teams together to work on things that are best done together. And I think this is a really good example of a working session that can be done in person, that takes a little bit of time with engagement, that your team can learn from each other and, who does it well. Angelo, I think you had mentioned that you're building out your programming. How are you advocating for the topics that you think are important for your team to cover?
Well, first of all, as I said, we are all project managers becoming CSMs. All of my team are PMP certified, so we know process and procedures, but we're adapting to the CSM role and learning to be more helpful to the end customer. We find it challenging right now just to get to the customer because we sell our product through a distributors. But what we're trying to do now is in getting them to engage is to be working with sales, working with the account managers closely. And we're not there to do the sale. We're focusing on just helping the customer be successful with the product, the software product that we are developing and moving from a hardware platform to the software platform. So, my team is getting trained with the product, going to practical CSM, doing some CSM training. And yeah, I don't know where we'd be at a sales call, but very interesting. And we have to do something. But right now, we're just building it and building our frameworks and building our process and procedures and how we're going to approach it. So your reach little spreadsheet is going to help us a lot in trying to use that as a tool as we go ahead and categorize these customers that, hey, do we spend one day with this person, or is this a several meeting person? We don't know yet, but we're trying to build that framework right now. Right now, we're just floundering and gathering as much information as you can. So, right. We're going to be more of a cost-based organization. Hopefully we'll turn some of this cost into sales, but for right now it's going to be cost that it's part of the sale, and hopefully retention.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great model. Start with that and build out where you want to get to, because you may be starting as you turn your group of project managers into CSMs, that it is a cost initially, but you can maybe start to set those expectations that you contribute to top line revenue. Whether you're actually closing the deal is not as important as being able to recognize that the customers that you're touching can be growing. And that's an important thing for everyone to think about, is you don't need to close the sale to have an impact. Think of what your marketing peers do, right? None of the marketers are involved in actually closing the sale, but they take attribution and contribute to certain customers that are brought in through marketing programs, right? Where there may be others that are brought in through sales programs, and they want to attribute the work that they're doing to the outcomes you get. You can see that as well, not just the leads that you identify as a customer success qualified lead. Is it a new opportunity that no one's ever come up with before? But the fact that you're actually working with those customers over, quarters and years, and they are growing, means that your team is having an impact. And I would encourage you to take credit. So I'll maybe one more. It looks like Danielle. Sorry, Angela.
Question I wanted to ask is charging for customer success management, right? We plan in our model, and our framework is we're going to give it for free for let's say 6 months. But how do we go into, once we kind of pull away from the customer and say, okay, you want us to continue, do you do it on a monthly or on a yearly subscription? What has you done, or have you, carved out an amount of the sale is that this is just for customer success? How is that done? I'd like to see some feedback in the chat if possible.
Yeah, maybe folks can put answers in the chat. There's clearly not one answer to should companies charge for customer success. But I'd be happy to talk with you, Angelo, offline about like what types of companies that's worked for, where it hasn't, depending on what you sell, the engagement, the size of your relationships. Are they mission critical to the company? And, what do they think of when they think of like customer success? So sometimes support is wrapped up, sometimes training is wrapped up in it. So there's not really one easy answer, but it is something that a lot of companies are thinking about, how to monetize their customer success organization. So at this point, I'd love to sort of take questions. This is a picture of one of my clients where they've seen their bookings increase significantly, and then their CEO recognized the CS leader with an award for bringing in this new way of thinking and helping to change the mindset of the organization, and also importantly, delivering actual results around it, right? So I'd encourage you to think about what can you do over the next couple months to set yourself up to contribute more to growth in 2025, right? So kind of bring this in. So I'll stop here. Love to take some questions from folks over the next 5 minutes. If there's anything I can answer, please feel free to get in touch with me about running workshops for your teams, speaking at your offsites, either that you get together or just in like lunch and learns that you have with your group that can be done virtually as well. And follow me on LinkedIn if you're not, and feel free to reach out to me.
Great. Well, I'll just highlight, we just have about 2 or 3 minutes left. So as Rod said, please, there's time for some comments, but I want to make sure that I say, again, thank you to Practical CSM for promoting this and enabling this event for Rod to share exactly what Reach is all about. So yeah, and thanks, Rod, for joining.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. Any questions? All right. Well, thanks so much for having me here. You get a couple minutes before your next meeting, and please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or if I can help you in your businesses. And I really appreciate your investment and would encourage you to kind of, like my daughter, rip off that tag. She did decide to go to Wisconsin. I was just out there last weekend for family weekend, and it's just a really good example of how each of us can be developing new skills to help us build the future that we want for ourselves. So thanks so much for your time, and thanks Jillian and Practical CSM for hosting this.